Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition.
Well, transportation troubles are at the driver's seat right now. From water to roads, labor issues continue to produce problems. And that's as we navigate those in this week's Farm Journal Report.
Trucks, I love them, I love them.
In the late 1970s, trucking gained interest thanks to the big screen. But today, it's a job that doesn't boast the glamour it once did.
So we don't have a ton of young people or other people that are just dying to get into the trucking industry. It's no longer a glamorous gig that people really want to get into anymore. So we are going to continue to see shortages.
Supply chain issues as a lack of drivers plagues the trucking industry.
We're currently about 80,000 drivers short in the trucking industry. In 10 years, they're thinking it's closer to 250 to 300,000 jobs that we're going to be short in the trucking industry.
Kelly Crepeau is a safety director and compliance manager for True North Compliance Services. She navigates the regulations that have a tight grip on truckers today.
I think that we're losing not only to those short haul careers, but other careers that they can be in a more controlled environment and a little bit safer and, again, have more conducive to a family life.
In late January, both the U.S. and Canada put in a vaccine mandate which requires truckers crossing the border to be vaccinated.
We've seen that the vaccine mandate coupled with the protest that's going on in Canada is also has affected cars coming out of Canada for now. You will be seeing it in the agri industry in the coming weeks when we're trying to get fertilizer out of Canada.
And just a week later, a new CDL requirement hit the trucking industry.
This particular regulation went into effect in 2018. It was passed final rule, final register is what it's called, in 2018 to go into effect, full effect in 2020. The FMCSA did decide that not all of the parts were ready to go, so they gave us an extension to 2020, and then that extension went even further into 2022.
Without either the Biden administration and the Trump administration stepping in to halt the new regulations, it could now cost those looking to get a CDL or upgrade to a Class A license in both time and money.
If you need a Class A and all of the endorsements that would go with it, that's when you're going to talk about your 21 days and your larger amounts of money, $8,500 to $10,000.
Crepeau says agriculture is exempt as long as the driver stays within the 150-mile radius air bubble. But if you travel outside that zone, the new regulations could be stifling.
If you were to go outside that 150 air miles to take, let's say, your corn to a grain elevator that's outside the 150, all of the federal regulations would apply to you, and that would include the commercial driver's license requirement.
The new CDL requirements could be yet another barrier for attracting new and younger truck drivers. As Crepeau says, some truck drivers are finding better paying jobs that allow work-life balance.
We're losing drivers too to not even truck driving jobs that are local. They can go work in a warehouse, an Amazon warehouse, pulling packages for the same amount of money and very little risk.
As the dire dilemma of truck driver shortages rolls on, Mike Steenhoek of the Soy Transportation Council says there's one main issue in the driver's seat.
We're really seeing this problem in each of the links of our supply chain, and I would argue the biggest culprit is a shortage of labor.
And as renewed interest in U.S. soybeans flows from trouble with South America's crop, it's something Steenhoek is watching closely.
It's great that we've got demand. Strong demand for what farmers grow, but if we don't have a transportation system that can accommodate it, then we're not going to be profitable, and the inland waterway system is a very consequential part of that supply chain.
It's more than a lack of truckers causing concern.
It's one thing to have a truck, you have to have a truck driver. It's one thing to have a barge flotilla, you have to have someone that can actually work those tows, and so that's the real concern that we have.
Steenhoek says containers piled up at ports is also pinching soybean exports in some areas.
We see those images of all these container vessels lined up outside of the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Having the ability to access some of those empty steel boxes, those containers, to be able to, they come in with consumer goods and then they get emptied and then they get loaded with agricultural products for the backhaul movement to Asia. That has become very challenging, and that's going to unfortunately remain so probably throughout the course of 2022.
The largest shipping company in the world recently said they expect things to ease the second half of the year as freight rates on the busiest shipping routes remain up to 10 times higher than what shippers saw in 2019. But as backlogs mount, Steenhoek says container constraints are at the forefront for the foreseeable future.
Unfortunately, it really is still kind of at its apex. Now we're seeing some numbers that it might be moderating throughout the course of this year, and you would assume with inflation being what it is, that will have some degree of impact on consumer spending that might mitigate some of the amount of freight that's coming in and helping create this logjam. But unfortunately, this is something that is going to be with us for a number of months.
As agriculture continues to navigate shipping issues, Steenhoek says the recent infrastructure package passed by Congress is a win.
What did happen is some of these projects did move to the batter's box. There actually is funding that has been deployed for some of these infrastructure projects, including one particularly on the upper Mississippi River, a lock and dam project, Lock and Dam 25.
A dam that will now see a longer chamber, allowing for barge traffic to move efficiently and reliably.
It's a savings of time, so going through a longer lock chamber will take you 45 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes instead of 2+ hours. So there's a time savings.
In addition to the funding from the infrastructure bill, Steenhoek says dredging has become a dire need and something that continues to take place along vital shipping veins.
Ironically, it was through the flood emergency legislation that was passed in 2019, but then did provide some funding for dredging activity that continued into 2021.
As river levels remain extremely low, dredging has helped barges continue to flow.
It allowed dredging activity to occur on the inland waterway system so that when we had low water levels, we were able to still have barge transportation basically continue unimpeded.
From investing in inland waterway system to renewed funding to repair rural bridges, injecting funds into infrastructure could help at a time where supply chain chaos continues.
Now, Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack did talk about infrastructure in his Ag Outlook Forum address this week, and he says infrastructure is another bright spot for agriculture. All right, when we come back, we'll continue our discussion from the Northern Corn and Soybean Expo. Again, that discussion happened before the issues in Ukraine, but there's still a lot to cover when we come back.